I'm Janice Ross, Managing Partner at Brand Fresh Management and WIT President. Joining me to moderate today's roundtable is Delanie West, Founding Creative Director at Be Super Creative and WIT's D&I Co-Chair. This is Women in Toys, Licensing, and Entertainment's first industry roundtable. Today, we're bringing together industry leaders in a way we've never done before to have a conversation that needs to happen. We'll be talking about the risk we face of losing female leaders at all levels and how we can retain women in a post-pandemic workforce. I want to thank everyone for joining in today. And right out of the gate, I want to let you know that we're listening to you and that we hear you. And WIT is here to be your advocate, your champion, and your ally.
We're here today, which also happens to be International Women's Day, so it's fitting to come together to discuss this topic. The events of 2020 have turned workplaces upside down and have impacted each and every one of us. The reality is women in our industry have been hit hard. We polled our WIT community, and this is what we heard. 78% are experiencing increased stress, overwhelm, and burnout. 56% are experiencing isolation or loneliness. 50% are experiencing increased workload with their jobs, and 45% are experiencing mental health issues. When we saw that the women in our industry are suffering so greatly, that it's been devastating for so many of our friends and colleagues, it made those statistics real, and it really made it personal.
You're so right, Delanie. Preparing for today was a really powerful experience for me, for you, for all of us. And we've been having these conversations surrounding this topic on a weekly, if not a daily basis for the last 12 months. So the feedback that we received, it only validated what we believe to be true.
And there's not a day that goes by that we aren't listening to our community, and really listening is the first step towards fixing the challenges women are facing. In fact, for the last 12 months, we've supported our community and taken action by delivering programming that they've asked for. So we're eager to kick off this conversation about women in the workforce, the first of many that will focus on the needs of our community with voices of leadership from across our industry.
So welcome, speakers, and thank you for being here. It is critically important to have a diverse set of perspectives for these conversations. So thank you all for taking a seat at the table. And let me introduce you all. We have today Ann Carahill, Director Category Leader, Toys and Games, Amazon. Cynthia Nishimoto, General Counsel, SVP Business and Legal Affairs at Bandai. Bryony Bouyer, SVP of Diversity, Inclusion, and Multicultural Strategy at Hasbro. Laura Zebersky, President, Jazwares. Skip Kodak, Regional President, AMS Market Group, Lego. Amy Thompson, EVP, Chief People Officer, Mattel. Jendayi Smith, Senior Graphic Designer, Dolls, Mattel. Tara Deacon, EVP, Chief People Officer, Spin Master. And Catherine Bachmeyer, Vice President of Toys and Publishing at Warner Brothers Consumer Products. So welcome, everyone.
Let me take everyone through today's format. There are 4 topics we'll be discussing, and each of our speakers have been paired up to explore each one. We won't have time for Q&A, but we want to know what's on your mind. I encourage everyone to please put your questions in the Q&A box, and we'll address them after today's roundtable. Here are the topics. 1, why do women matter in the workplace? In toys, licensing, and entertainment, what's at risk if we lose women in the decision-making roles at all levels? 2, how does work from home and living at work affect the women in the short and long term? Why the urgency to address it now? 3, how are all these issues heightened for women in underrepresented groups? And question 4, how do employers, and employees come together to solve these issues and safeguard a future for women leaders in business? So let's get started. For question 1, I'd like to bring in Ann Carahill and Catherine Bachmeyer. We know women matter in the workplace. In toys, licensing, and entertainment, what's at risk if we lose women in decision-making roles at all levels? Ann, why don't you start out?
Absolutely. I'd love to kick it off. Thanks so much for having me. I'm so thrilled to be part of this panel and really excited about today's discussion. I think for me, in thinking about this question, we know that diverse and inclusive teams, including women in leadership roles and across levels, have a positive impact on the products and services that we deliver for customers and for kids. And they helps us learn faster, innovate faster. And I think in particular for me in toys, we know that diversity in toys and content that we produce is particularly critical, because the toys that we're creating today help inspire our future leaders and help them learn all the critical skill sets they need. And we have such an opportunity to be more diverse and inclusive in the products and content that we have. And hopefully that will have a flywheel effect with the kids that we bring these products and content to.
Catherine?
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here today. And in addition to what Anne said, I think that, women have changed our industry for the better. They bring a unique perspective and a lot of insights to the business. On one hand, we know they're the main influencer and decision maker in our households in regards to purchase decisions. And on the other, we also know that they're a gatekeeper in terms of what kids can watch in entertainment. As that, women are key stakeholders for our industry and need to be decision makers to improve our products, our storytelling, and our marketing for the futures to come.
Women have made great strides in the workplace over the past 10 years in terms of earning, employment, careers, but since COVID, women are now more likely than men to leave the workforce, cut their work hours, or delay re-entering the workforce. In our industry, do you think we're at risk of losing years of progress, and why? Anne?
Yeah, I think this has certainly been an unparalleled challenge across the last year with COVID. And we know that it's impacting our families and our workplaces and our communities, and that women are disproportionately hit harder. And you add the sort of working from home and schooling from home, and it just sort of adds to the complexity. And so to me, I do think we're at risk. And I think that should be what gives us the catalyst to drive change and to make sure that we are supporting and uplifting the women in our teams and our companies to help make sure that we don't lose that diverse perspective. We really need women to make sure that we're challenging the status quo. And I think that's going to lead to more, inclusive toys and better outputs across the board.
Key advice. Catherine?
Yes, I think we are at risk of losing women just because, as primary caregivers for families, they've been hit really hard across the board. And, there's been days, I think, when a lot of women on our team have basically thought this is too hard, right? And we've heard in the beginning comments that women are affected in a broad way. Some of us have too much going on and are balancing homeschooling, a full-time career, and a catering service. Others are basically home alone and isolated, and are basically exposed to too many stresses and have nowhere to share. So I think it's a really critical moment right now for women, and very stressful.
Yeah, absolutely. I think once a week, I quote this statistic. In December of 2020, women accounted for 100% of the 140,000 jobs that were lost, while men gained 16,000 jobs, according to the National Women's Law Center. Have you seen a similar trend in within your company or with the companies that you do business with? And what impact is it having on your company or your work environment? Anne?
Yeah, I think for us, I don't have specific, stats. I think those sort of tell the story or the output of all of the challenges that we're collectively, facing. And so I think some of the things we're thinking about are how to make sure that we are changing the work hours and really supporting people where they are and where they need help. And making sure that we're flexible and changing our style to be able to respond.
Yeah. Catherine?
Same as Anne, I don't have statistics, but we've all been through a lot of change this year. The business has changed, our teams have changed, our structures have changed, and that's impacted women across the board. At the same time, I think it's also been an opportunity for us this past year as women in leadership to actually set new direction and bring flexibility to the workplace. We can empathize, and as such, we can encourage our teams to navigate this critical time and support the women in our teams to navigate this time.
Thank you, Anne and Catherine, for giving us so many points to consider. We have a challenge. The future of work has changed, and we have to adjust.
You know, it's interesting too, because, you know, Delanie, I'll jump in too. I think, Anne, you mentioned future leaders, because I think that, you know, we talk about our consumers as being our future leaders, but I think just a little bit to the point there in terms of losing women at all levels, but certainly in, you know, senior leadership positions, I think they are also advocating for women down the chain. And I think that that's something for all of us to think about as well, is that we need that that advocacy at the leadership level and all the way down, you know. So yeah, I think you guys really covered it, but that's these are important to be thinking about.
Next up, we have Cynthia and Laura.
Yeah, thank you so much. So Cynthia and Laura, I believe you're coming on screen now. There we go. Great. Awesome. So we do know what's at risk here. We're just talking about that. And really, we do have blurred lines right now. We've got working from home and living at work. And how will this affect women both in the short term and the long term? And why the urgency to address it now? So Cynthia, let's kick off with you.
Thanks, Janice, and thanks so much for having me. You know, when we looked at the initial topic, when we said short term and long term, I don't even think that that's the appropriate categorization, because it's a constantly evolving short term. So, you know, initially we were all dealing with trying to adjust to work from home schedules, homeschooling, and then some schools went back into play, and then now we have vaccines. So even our short term, and instead of long term, I really view it more like it's several short term periods, always constantly evolving to address the needs of what's happening at large, as well as with our individual employees. So I think, you know, flexibility and adaptability to understand the circumstances that everyone is facing. You know, not everyone lives in the same state with the same regulations. Not everyone has the same family life situation as well. So, you know, really trying to ensure that we're listening to our employees, what their concerns are, what the challenges they're having, and then trying to tailor our response to them and our accommodations to them, and not think that we're going to have a cookie cutter approach that will apply across the board to everybody, because everybody's situation is unique. And, you know, our main objective is to partner with everybody and make sure that we are trying to have as much flexibility as well as meet the business needs that, you know, we obviously do have product to release and, you know, sales to achieve and shipments to make, but we want to be conscientious so that we don't lose the workforce, and try to offer as many accommodations that we can to ensure that they want to stay with us and not leave the workforce.
Absolutely. Laura, I'd love to get your thoughts.
You know, I think it's so interesting and almost a great opportunity for us to be having this conversation around COVID. And, you know, because these are conversations we probably should have been having for 20 years, 30 years about women in the workplace. And I really had the advantage of having flexibility as I built my career, be it as a lawyer first and then at Jazwares. But so many women didn't have that opportunity of flexibility. And we've learned that flexibility matters. And so at Jazwares, we've always talked about getting women back to work after they've had babies. And that has been, you know, hugely important for us to have women in senior leadership roles, because if they're leaving the workforce after they have a baby, then we've lost that opportunity for them to grow their career. And so I see this as this amazing opportunity where we're really talking about flexibility and for women and men and the parenting needs that they need and how we can meet them as a company, and being super flexible in that regard. And Cynthia is right. We have, everybody's situation is different. Everybody's home support is different. Everybody's children are different, and lack of children and we have adapted and the work day has adapted. And what I love to see is that for some teams, they might go back to work at 7 and they may not be working from 12 to 3 because of school. And we've allowed that to happen at Jazwares. And everybody's been really understanding of a single mom situation versus somebody who has a full internal support system. And especially when you're homeschooling or you have children with special needs, it is beyond comprehensible what some women have had to endure, and some men as well. And we've been very proud because nobody's left, but it's taken that flexibility, and it will have to really, we are going to all have to continue that in the future. And we have to continue it because if we go back to the way we were, then we're going to be facing these same problems again. And I'm excited that we talk about flexibility.
You know, it's interesting, Laura, you mentioned something that I think about a lot too, this idea that COVID actually has kind of shined a light on something that was actually existing, right? So we've got this kind of double shift that a lot of women feel that they've been working, right? So what's kind of happened with COVID now is we have this something that people are referring to as like the double shift, right? So people are really feeling even worse, right? that it's like this 24/7, right? We're really, and I think what we hear too is like, you know, employee burnout, right? And how is everyone talking about, you know, like managing the priorities, the deadlines, you know, as we think about that, something that double shift that people are kind of managing right now?
I think if for me, just to jump in, I think that it was almost worse in the beginning. You know, every second was micromanaged of your day. It was, we never got off a Zoom. We never got off a call. Nobody wanted to end a call 3 minutes early so that somebody could go get a snack or make a snack for their kids or whatever, go to the restroom. And I do feel that I've seen in my own personal shift about, and I've been really encouraging people in our own organization, is it's okay not to be in every single meeting. It's okay to say no. And you don't have to be invited to be important in the conversation. So I think that those are, for us moving forward, we have to force a balance.
Cynthia, anything to add there?
Yeah, I was just going to agree. I mean, personally, I advocated for work from home for a long time because my company relocated and it made my commute really, really far, and it wasn't very welcome. But this was almost like a blessing. Of course, we wish no one would have contracted COVID, but having been in this situation and demonstrating to our management that, you know, work from home does work with some parameters, obviously challenges, but, you know, it really has made them learn that we can do this, and we just have to put the right parameters in to enable people to have a better work-life balance, more flexibility, you know, just letting you know what the expectations are up front. And I think, you know, that's what's really critical is, you know, people that want to look at this from a long-term perspective have to demonstrate, you know, what's been the successes, and if there have been challenges, how are you going to ensure that that challenge is resolved in the future so that you can convince your management that this is a long-term solution that will work for everybody.
You know, it's actually a really interesting point you make there too, Cynthia, because 80% of our community actually, we put out a survey, 80% of our community actually said they would prefer a hybrid model. And I think what we recognize is that a hybrid model, by the way, is not perfect. I think you bring up a lot of good points just about demonstrating how employees can make it work on their end and vice versa. But I think that it's something that people can look at and consider. But, you know, also it does take a lot on the employer's part to actually have to sort of a bit restructure so that when people are at home, like decision-making meetings aren't happening when people are at home. So it's interesting, you know, as we start to think about the post-pandemic workplace, is hybrid model something that, for example, Laura, you know, is that something that you guys are looking at, or what's your thoughts? Because it's not perfect, but I think there are challenges.
Well, our office is based in Florida, so we are basically separate from every other state in the country, and we've been voluntary back at work for a little bit now. And we are moving to a hybrid model at Jazwares, and it's going to be determined by each team and what makes sense for the team, 2 days in or 3 days in, depending on the needs of your specific team and what important meeting days are or not. And we foresee this as being a long-term proposition for us. We're very excited about it, and it gives us a lot of opportunity in bringing on additional amazing talent, because 5 years ago, 3 years ago, 2 years ago, that would never even been a consideration. And now it really opens the door. And I think also opening the door is modifications of travel moving forward. And I know many of the women here, we've all traveled hundreds of thousands of miles a year. And the fact that that doesn't necessarily need to be in our future, it's really awesome. As much as I want to see all of you, I think it would be amazing to not see you every week. And so that's going to really, I think it's a big change for our industry moving forward and for women in the workplace and being able to really thrive and shine.
No, that's great. And I think also you hit on an important point too, is that hybrid models do give employers an opportunity to think about more diverse talent, people that are not actually necessarily in South Florida, or that, again, it opens up, I think, a lot of opportunity. But I think what this moment definitely tells us is that we need to look at the workplace, and there is this opportunity to reinvent it and to be a bit more flexible, but also sustainable for everyone. But I think, one last thing I would just say too is that, one of the things that we're hearing too is just how employees will keep a pulse on just the well-being of all their employees. And it sounds like you all are doing that you're connected with them, and that you really want to, make this always on kind of feeling work for everyone. So I thank you for that. I think there's a lot that we want to, think about coming out of the post-pandemic kind of workplace now. Delanie, I'll turn it over to you for the next question.
Thanks, Janice. Moving into question number 3. Next up, we have Bryony, Bouyer, Skip Kodak, and Courtney Oliver. And building on what we've discussed in questions 1 and 2, how are these issues, how are those issues heightened for underrepresented minorities? Bryony, why don't you start out?
Sure. First of all, just want to say thank you for having me. I was thinking back 16-ish years ago, and this whole thing started, and now here you are, and here we are, sort of one much larger organization. I think, as everybody said, COVID has pointed out the inequalities that's been in our systems across the board. So we're looking at the penal code system, looking at educational system, healthcare systems, workplace systems, and we're certainly seeing and have seen the impact that COVID itself, the disease and the death that is caused for ethnic minorities. So that is an absolute fact. It's disproportionate. And that has a lot to do with the kinds of jobs that we have and so on and so forth. But you start to get very specific. And I was thinking about Asians or Asian Americans or Asians from Canada or the UK and the violence that group of people saw starting in February of last year and accelerating over the last month or so during Lunar New Year. And you think about, what does that mean for that person coming into work every day, right? So you've got this COVID crisis, you've got the fear of stepping outside of your house, you've got the hardship of having to explain this to your children, to yourself, and the emotional toll that takes. It's pretty incredible. And then, you think about June of last year and the racial crisis that we all observed. We, saw what happened to George Floyd, and the collective grief is the only term I can think of that all sort of came forward, because not only was it hard to see someone die literally in front of you on television, but it brought up all those microaggressions. Sometimes we think about racism, we think of it as the big overt racism, but it's also the small cuts, as we like to call them, that may happen to people every day. And you can go on, LGBT, people with mental disabilities, what is the impact, not just on people, but on women, and then women of color, women just of difference, and how much greater it might seem. So, I'm gonna pause there because I could just keep, but I'll turn it over to my colleagues.
Skip, would love to hear your insight.
Super. Well, I can't give first person insight. I can give allies insight though. And I just want to support what Bryony just walked us through, because it's very clear. You can mine all the statistics you would like to mine. There is no putting a different kind of wrapper on this. The crisis has hit especially underrepresented women's groups especially hard. It's hit women harder, way harder than men. And there's a lot of different challenges. The one that maybe I'll just chip in with here is in terms of access or equity. We've got a greater risk. We've got two risks. We've got one at the top end with senior women leaving organizations. And we know that, senior women leaders in particular, who have in the last 5 or 6 years, become a much greater share of C-suite and a much greater share of kind of VP plus populations, are critical advocates for underrepresented minorities and also for gender equality and equity in the workplace. Far more so than in most cases men are. And then at the other end of the spectrum in most companies, we've got a broken first rung between entry level and first level managers. And actually in the current environment, I feel more fear, without the benefit of a lot of stats to back this up, that we may be headed more backwards in that space in particular. I think the last thing I'll just chip in with here before I turn it over to Courtney for her reflections is, I think it probably matters a lot what your community or your company have chosen to do. And that doesn't mean that if your company didn't take, or your brands didn't take a big stand publicly, that it was inconsequential. What probably mattered even more than that was what you did internally, to recognize and try to create a space, at least for conversations. And maybe by doing that, then learn how to make the space safe for everyone to be able to lean in and share, and for someone like me to learn. And to get kind of a firsthand, or at least a close secondhand view of impact. Communal grief is a different thing than I've ever had to experience before. And I'm not happy I had the chance to do it. I'm not proud that I had the chance to do it, but I'm grateful I had the chance to do it.
Thank you. That's good.
The safe space and the listening was incredibly important. And I've been hearing that from a lot of my colleagues and from WIT. Courtney.
Yeah, so I'm just going to expand really on the key word that Skip used, because it's probably one of the most powerful things that we have to continue to focus on. One is that word allyship. The other for me is the word education. And really Skip kind of leaned in about, our leaders leaving at the top, then who's behind them, and are we grooming and training? So one thing I know that we've been talking about, and what we're doing a little bit in the consumer product space at Viacom CBS, is talking about our pipeline. We're looking at, organizations like you all and things like Bragg, and really looking to go out and educate at the college level for internships, fellowships, young people of color, or anyone who comes into an underrepresented category, and showing them that the licensing industry is a viable career option, right? Because typically people of color go to school and major in finance, or maybe marketing, or they might go the banking route. No one's talking to them about the entertainment industry or consumer products. I mean, to be honest, consumer products, I didn't know what it was until they became my client group, right? And so when you dive in, people don't even know what HR is half the time until you really peel back the layers of the onion. So allyship is key, because we need more leaders like Skip, who are brave enough to say what they don't know, but they're willing to learn. But you have to complement that with education and the safe space, to your point, to make it okay for all of us to bring our true, authentic, whole self in. If today is not a good day, we should be okay to say, you know what happened yesterday with George Floyd or whatever, I'm a mess. I'm a complete mess. I'm going to be of no service today. I need to take a time out. But even if I take a time out, ask me something. Where I think leaders fail in this D&I spaces, we don't yet have the right questions to ask our team, whether you be male, female, LGBTQ. So it is learning the language, but also remembering it's okay to be uncomfortable. We're going to be uncomfortable in this D&I space for a long time. We should remain uncomfortable, and to know there's no finish line. This work should never stop. It's ongoing. And it's just the steps that we take on a daily basis, where hopefully in someone's future, the level of this conversation of space, inclusion, it should just change and shift, but the conversation should never go away.
Right. We talk about managing through grief and managing through all of the things that we're having to deal with before we even get into the office, or before we even turn our computers on. And we talk about, well, how can we create change within our companies, within our industries? And the question that I always think about is, how do we nurture? I mean, we know how to recruit, we know how to go out make sure that we're right-fitting pipelines. But what can we do to nurture the leaders that we have today? What can we do to increase support for those underrepresented groups?
There are many things I think we can do, and on behalf of Hasbro, I'd like to say that we are doing and had been doing before this whole issue of the racial crisis or COVID even hit. You know, we started off with goals very specifically that are published, and it sort of became a part of my job to ensure that we collectively sort of move down that path. And you know, there's a standard education on allyship and unconscious bias training, but it's also ensuring that we are looking at our talent systems, how we select talent, and debiasing that system. And obviously, I know for sure that in the industry, and I can absolutely 100% say within Hasbro, no one intends to be biased, right? That's why it's called unconscious bias. But having a talent selection system that ensures that we're looking at it through the lens of women, through the lens of other underrepresented groups, and ensuring that we are giving equal access to talent. And then where the gaps are, where are those gaps, and how do we train to that gap, becomes really, really key. And it's something that, you know, is in place, and we're continuing to accelerate. And as Courtney said, it never ends. You know, it doesn't stop. This is the work that continues. I think for me, what COVID has done is that it has accelerated the work to a point where it's no longer an HR initiative. It doesn't just sit with corporate anymore. We're now hearing the voices of the people actually demanding, not just asking, but demanding that we've got more representation, that we've got these programs in place, that we ensure and present people with how do I become an ally is another big outcry. To Skip's point, what can I do as someone with privilege that can help someone else? And so there are many paths to this, but it's just always laddering up to a particular goal, perhaps, that you're going after.
And Bryony, you perfect segue when you talk about laddering up. And earlier, Skip referenced the broken rung, women going above manager level. There's work that needs to happen, in that early stage of your career, of someone's career. What should we, and Skip, I would love to get your thoughts on this. What should we be doing to support those employees and those women to get them to the first and second rung of their careers?
Yeah, so I wish I had it solved, and then our workforce representation would be even better, not only at my company but in our industry. But a few things I have thought about that I think might make a difference pretty broadly. So the first one would be, for every minute or second you're willing to put into figuring out how to recruit in a more representative way, you should be putting just as much effort into creating the inclusive and welcoming atmosphere that's required for people to be able to succeed who might at first not find themselves when they look upwards, right? So it's about onboarding. It's also about then a dedicated effort, not so much to, demonstrate partiality, but to create equity and create the opportunity in a truly fair way. Once you've attracted the right candidate base, the best talent from across the universe that you're scanning, to make sure that they also have the same great opportunity to move on in their careers. And fundamentally, that's one spot. Another spot would be to think about how we train our senior people leaders to identify time and opportunity to mentor and to champion, in most cases, maybe more importantly, anybody who's underrepresented in their company's workforce. Because that difference between mentoring and championing, mentoring being kind of, let me put my arm around your shoulder and maybe share some wisdom with you, and championing is more about, okay, we found a door we can't quite get open, how do we kick it open? And making a difference to accelerate pace of development, because in addition to needing to work harder, longer in an already unequal system, women, and especially underrepresented women, have to work even longer, endure even, I'll call it, harsher comparison to standards than someone like myself has ever had to deal with. And I think we need to be mindful of that if we're going to not only attract, but retain and grow talent across all segments of our society.
Oh goodness, mentorship is so important. Courtney, would you like to weigh in on?
I mean, yeah, so I definitely echo everything Skip said into view. Mentorship is key, but it's also sometimes the invitation and exposure, right? So, you know, I may not be brave enough to open my mouth or raise my voice or share my ideas in the room. I might share them with you in our one-on-one if you're my manager, but in a larger setting, because sometimes they're cultural or personal issues, right? So sometimes as people of color or someone in an underrepresented group, we're just happy that we've been hired. We're happy maybe that we even got invited to the meetings. And sometimes we just get so grateful for the half a seat at the table that we have that we just want to lay low and under the radar, because sometimes if you're too loud, you might bring the wrong type of attention. So to Skip's point, that mentorship and guidance is needed. I mean, my career, I give all thanks to every champion and leader who saw something in me and took me under their wings, but also correct me when I'm wrong, right? So giving feedback as well, or pinging me or call me. I'm on Zoom, so you can text me, you can get me however you choose to at this point to say, I understand where you were going with that, but next time consider it this way. Or as we're working for your next level, here's what I need to see you do. Let me see your presentation. Let me walk you through, you know, it's all those little things. But also, please just ask people, whatever group you're in, even men, because there's a vulnerability that men are experiencing right now because all we are talking about is race and gender. So we witnessed some white men saying, well, what about us? So let's just ask people, are you okay? How are you? I notice you haven't been speaking up in meetings. Is everything okay at home right now in this new workplace that you're on Zoom? I notice you don't come on camera. So it's the mentorship, and it really is small talk, uplifting. Who are you giving exposure to? Who are you taking into the room? Who are you letting go to the meeting for you? As a leader, you don't always need to be there. So if I'm your rising star, if you all do succession planning, groom me to go manage that meeting with the president for you. So I think that that is really what's going to also shift the needle. Are we truly being inclusive when we are grooming talent from every level? And if you do that as the SVP or EVP, hopefully that rubs off on your direct report. So it just becomes the norm of how we all work as a community of leaders.
Courtney, you have given so many gems and I could not take notes. I am so sorry, but I'm going to remember, are you okay? And that can be asked to everybody. Are you okay? Bryony, Skip, Courtney, thank you for sharing your insight. You know, we can definitely say that manager support, sponsorship, impartial hiring and promotion practices, they're key to a workplace that delivers opportunity and fairness to everybody. And we have a lot of work to do, but thank you for giving us some.
Delanie, can I just add one thought to that?
Please.
It looks like we may have some time. So I know we talk a lot about, and all rightly so, from a sponsorship versus mentorship and allyship, which is great, and we need to continue. While we have the platform, I promised that I would say this. We talk about sort of COVID in this larger sense. We bring it into women. We talk about sort of underrepresented groups, but fundamentally, it's about the individual. And so if I had one thing to ask everybody that's listening on this is just to really ask, to your point, Courtney, how are you doing? But then really listen. Listen to the words, but listen to what's not being said, perhaps, and then find ways to take action, perhaps on that specific situation, but also look for ways to ladder that up into maybe a complex thing that can apply to many. And it's not limited to, you know, someone that's your colleague or someone that's your mentoring. It could be your president or your boss. You know, if we all just did this, because it is so individual, because the way you feel in the morning, the way you felt in June to the way you feel today is different. The way you feel at 8 o'clock in the morning is very different to how you might feel at 3 o'clock, because something may have interrupted your day. So making it individual and really asking every day, you know, how are you doing, and really listening, I think is also just key. So just adding on to Courtney's point.
My goodness, that is such a good takeaway, because sometimes it's that one question that allows you to unblock and move forward with your day. Thank you, Bryony, for driving that one home. It's important. We have Amy, Jendayi, and Tara up next.
Yeah, it's hard to believe we're actually moving to our final topic. And Actually, Bryony, you also, like, a good segue too, because I truly believe that through crisis comes opportunity, that there are things that we can be taking forward that can help us all be better at what we're doing and how we do it. These conversations that we've had also today have been incredibly constructive. And what we want to move to now is let's explore maybe tangible paths forward, ways that we can come together as employees and employers to help solve these problems. Because if we don't solve them, we won't be safeguarding the future for women leaders in our business. So, so Amy, Jendayi, let's go ahead and start with you. But welcome, and welcome, Tara. Thank you.
And I'll just start by saying, it's so rewarding to be part of this coalition and so many great leaders in our industry who are committed to advancing inclusion and the topics we've talked about so far today. So thank you for the opportunity to also be a part of it. When I think about what can employers do today, and recognizing this is going to be a journey that carries us forward for quite a while, I do think there's two immediate steps that employers can take to continue to advance females in careers across the industry. The first one is promoting flexibility and really empowering female leaders to set a schedule that works for them and allows them to balance what's most important in their lives. Some companies struggle with this concept because I think the first reaction is like, how's the work going to get done? But the companies that have figured out how to manage to outcomes and not activity and time in the day, those are the companies that are really starting to see more progressive engagement and retention of female talent. So simple things like encouraging time off and supporting leaves of absences, both intermittent and extended. Other things like phasing back to work over a period of time after working moms deliver their new babies. I mean, these are easy shifts that employers can make to help women balance, the demands both at home and in the workplace. And then also for employers to start creating community and support networks for women is also key to helping them achieve their work-life integration. So promoting flexibility, I think, is the first step that employers can take. The second step is really listening to employees. And what we've seen is a direct correlation between retention and well-being, meaning that, happier employees are more optimistic, they're more motivated, and they tend to stay at companies longer. So really learning to lead and listen with empathy and ask that question that Bryony mentioned, how can I help? Having open and honest conversations are really key to learning what's on the minds and hearts of our people. So some practices that we've incorporated at Mattel, our employee resource groups are certainly instrumental in influencing policy change and program improvements, but also skip level meetings where our senior most leaders are engaging with employees and roundtable conversations at all levels of the company, pulse surveys. I mean, these are really important mechanisms to stay connected to the needs of the employees. So, Women of Mattel and our parents employee resource group, those are two ERGs that have been really helpful feedback loops for us and influencing how we advance support programs. And Jendayi was a part of that. So I'd like to take this opportunity to introduce Jendayi Smith. She's one of our senior graphic designers supporting our dolls category, so she can share her story with you all today.
So yes, like Amy said, I have a story to tell. So let's flash back to 2017. I'm pregnant, everything's going well. And 2 days before I hit 35 weeks, my water breaks. And it was a very scary experience. My husband had to rush me to the hospital and I was in labor and on bed rest for 2 days and my son comes. Of course, he's 5 weeks early, so he's very small and he's just my little bundle of joy. But it's still a very emotional experience. And he was born at 3 pounds, 15 ounces, and he was in the NICU for 9 days. So this, of course, was an emotional experience, but it also served as a catalyst for me and motivation for me to say, how can I change the Mattel maternity leave policy? And not that it was bad at all, but it was like, there's always room for improvement. So as I got home and settled into the routine, I started doing a little bit of research and I put together this proposal. And once I came back from maternity leave, I was like, okay, I was on a mission. I was like, who do I meet with? How do I turn this in? How do I, level this up? But little did I know that senior leadership actually had this idea and what Amy was talking about, the skip level meetings, which I think is an awesome idea. And I feel like every company should honestly do that. So skip level meetings are when anybody in the company can set up a meeting. It's very casual too. So it's not like you have to have this big presentation or anything, but a very casual meeting with senior leadership. So of course I set up a meeting with Amy, our chief people officer. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna bring in my presentation to her. So I brought it in and I presented it to her. I told her my birth story and immediately she was very receptive to it. So I was like feeling really encouraged after that meeting. I emailed her a digital copy. If there's anything I can help with, please let me know, So it wasn't long after that, honestly, that HR reached out to me and they were like, we want you to be involved in changing the maternity leave policy and improving it. So I served as a consultant. There was some back and forth, what did I think about this? How do I think moms will, interpret this? So it was an awesome experience. And in the end, the maternity leave policy was changed and it changed with more time, more money, and more support, which is something that all working moms need and of course is very important. And to this day, like I'm excited telling this story. I love talking about it because it's like something that makes me really happy. And of course, sometimes it brings tears to my eyes because I think about the moms that this will help for, years to come. So I'm very proud of it. And I'm also, I was happy with the partnership with senior leadership. And I also felt, supported as a working mom too. And hopefully that all working moms will feel the support from their companies as well. Thank you.
Wow. Jendayi, thank you for sharing that story. I think it does actually really bring it to life when we hear, Amy, exactly, how this all has been working for Mattel. I'd love to turn to Tara. Tara, I'd love to get your thoughts on some ideas and ways that we can come together, employees and employers, to really safeguard this future for women.
Yeah, thank you, Janice, and thank you, Amy and Jendayi, for sharing your stories and experiences. I will say, you both dread as a speaker being last on an agenda. You're like, gosh, what will I come up with to say that would be unique? And then on the other hand, you're like, wow, what an opportunity to reflect. But I think, I would just start by emphasizing things I heard Courtney and Amy say about the importance of listening, right? And similar to some of the other pieces that have been shared, I think, both at Spin Master and as I network with heads of HR and business leaders around the world, this is a time for listening more than ever. And I think, very practically, I think we've done 8 formal surveys over a 12-month period at Spin Master. Similarly, we've held we have open forums with the founders every month where there's no agenda other than we ask the question, are you okay? And how is this COVID experience for you in Russia versus Asia versus the United States versus Europe? And we all just simply share. And it's a beautiful version, I think, of, but listening, but also that community therapy that you get at work with your colleagues. I think the other thing that we've done at Spin Master, which is just and it's something, again, I think as a practitioner applies, for generations, we've talked about work-life and work-life balance. And I think the pandemic has done so many things, good, bad, and challenging, but it has really forced the integration of work lifestyle. And I think employers have an obligation to raise up and say, let's stop treating the person as 2 different selves. It's really one self, right? It's really one self, and COVID and through the Zoom experience we're all living, both of those lives come together very visibly for everyone every day. And so we have said, thinking of work lifestyle, how do we raise our lens and collectively in our community form new habits together? And I don't want to repeat things, my other panelists have said around formal benefit programs and wellness. And we have done all of those things as well within our organization. I would say something I haven't heard that we did this year is we looked across with a consumer lens and said, forget looking as a head of HR, but myself as a working person, the mom of 2 young kids, what's the type of support I need? It's not necessarily a formal employee assistance program or a wellness benefit, But what I would love and can incorporate into my life is unlimited access to the Calm app for me and my family. And that's something that everyone can download and apply. For all of our parents who are, whether it's preschool children, high school children, caregivers, providing benefits to assist with remote education in school. And knowing social activities for children have been canceled through the pandemic around the world, introducing a benefit and a service that allows people to draw on virtual dance classes, tutoring, story time, just to simply provide our colleagues who are parents a bit of a break, right? And so, and this is us trying to form new habits. I think the other thing I would mention is, and online, if some of you Googled, I'm new to Spin Master relatively. I've been here less than 2 years, but more importantly, I'm also new to the toy industry. My background was solely in, finance, telecommunications, much larger organizations than the one I'm a part. But one of the things that I think is unique about Spin and unique about the collection of companies that's here that sometimes get forgotten is kids are our business. And so one of the things we did through the pandemic was kind of open our workplaces to children and said, why should it be bad for a child to pop into a Zoom meeting? Why should it be bad for someone to bring their child to work? Why should someone feel any level of anxiety about a child needing an appointment and a parent needing to step away, or whatever it may be? And so through this period, I think from our board, through our founders, all the way down, it's been this approach to a work lifestyle and remembering fundamentally why we're here, right? Which is to, enhance play, enhance life experiences, and how do we bring that into our workplace? And I think that's something both from, helping with personal stress, anxiety, the pressure we're all feeling as women of managing your home and your work, to just know, hey, it's okay for them to be the same. And, our colleagues actually expect to see each other's children on the call. And we do family cartoon days and dance parties and things like that to help the worlds come together. And I think that's important. We are all human, and this is an unprecedented human experience, and we've said, how do we together form some new habits?
Wow, I really appreciate that perspective too. I think I've been on so many Zoom calls, I know for myself, where it's so true. Kids will come into the screen and women oftentimes are apologizing. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. And it does. We forget. First of all, we're working. We're working from home, and this is our lives, and people have a very direct lens into it now. So it's about embracing that, but also remembering the industry that we are all in, and the privilege that we have to, for consumer products and goods that are touching entertainment, that are touching children. So I think that's so great. One of the things I wanted to touch on as well, just quickly, is, Amy and Jendayi, you shared that story. I think that I would ask you too, what's your recommendation for companies that are where maybe people don't feel as comfortable bringing those solutions forward? I mean, how do leaders open up that space for people to come to them with those ideas? I think sometimes it's hard. It's really hard.
I think Tara's point is spot on. When companies can start thinking about their employees as the consumer and really think about the end-to-end experience, just as we want consumers to love our brands and products, from an HR perspective, we want our employees to be just as excited about programs and offerings internally. And I think when the mindset shift kind of focuses more on that and starts to invite suggestions and ideas from the employees, it just makes the offering so much more relevant and so much more powerful. So whether that's a suggestion box or through the ERG channels, or surveys that invite ideas and suggestions, whatever the mechanism is, I just think the more companies can get into regular dialogue with their employees about what matters most, can really help to shape the outcomes in an impactful way.
That is so key. Yeah, thank you. I want to thank Amy, you and Jendayi and Tara for really kind of bringing us home here with some, I think, really good ideas that we all need to think about. I just think overall, and it's hard to believe that we're coming to the end of our hour here, but what we know is that we do have a lot to think about. And I think the other thing that we recognize is kind of the weight here is that the choices that we make today will shape the workforce and our industry for decades to come. So there's a lot of work to be done, and coming together, all of you leaders here today has been incredible.
And we want you to know this isn't the last that you will hear from us. This is just the start. You'll continue to see us show up, curate, cultivate, and engage our partners in dialogue. This is our commitment to change because this work is really important to us.
That's right, Delanie. We are committed to advocating for this change. And in fact, I'm happy to announce too that we're going to be launching our new Challenge to Change campaign for 2021. You will be hearing more about this in the coming weeks. But I want to thank all of you out there for joining us today. And I want to thank our speakers for using their collective voices and for helping us shine a light on this very important conversation. So thank you all today, and I hope you all have a great week.